G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Angela Henderson from Angela Henderson Consulting, based in Brisbane, Australia. Thanks for your time today, Angela.
Hey, so good to be here.
Let's start with how we know each other. So Carla in your PR team reached out and thought you'd be a good guest to come on, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, super. Yeah, like I said, it's always fun connecting with other amazing humans. And like I said, the fact that you're in Tassie and that's where we've got some land and stuff too, even the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Brisbane, especially in the winter down here in Tasmania to escape the cold.
100%. Brisbane's a great spot.
Yeah. And how long have you been in Brisbane?
We came back, this will be 16 years, 17 years in February we've been back. So yeah, so we started off in Hobart actually, down in Eaglehawk Neck, where I was actually a teacher assistant, because that's all I could do when I first got over here because of my social work credentials and getting accredited here, etc.
Yeah.
And then, but in Brisbane we'll be back now, 16 official years,
Right.
this year.
So, you're originally from Canada?
Originally from Canada, and I say, what's not to love about Canada? We've got moose, great beer, hockey, and Pamela Anderson. I mean, life's pretty good.
Did not know Pamela Anderson was Canadian. I know Mike Myers is, and there's a couple of great. Is Ryan Reynolds Canadian?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. There's a couple of great Canadians. John Candy, he was Canadian, wasn't he?
He was, yes. Great man, very funny man. You know, what was it? Jamaican bobsled team. Loved
That's
him.
right.
So many great movies by John Candy.
And Dan Aykroyd as well.
Yes.
Yeah, Blues Brothers. Love that movie. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money. Yeah,
so at the moment, I currently work with women all around the world. I'm very passionate about getting more wealth into the hands of women. Sorry for the male listeners. You guys can have the cream of the crop too, but that's just what my specialty is, getting more wealth into the hands of women. And really, ultimately, what I do is there's so many different pieces, as we all know, when we're creating a business. So I help women get all the pieces in place to help them hit 4 and 5 figure months and then on to 6 and 7+ figure years, but without burning out. It's a really big passion of mine. I'm an ex-mental health clinician where I used to diagnose people with schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, anxiety, autism, etc. And there is a very big hustle culture in the online space in particular, and I'm very much about, I despise the hustle culture. Don't get me wrong, I think there's an element that you do work hard at different stages in your business. I mean, none of us are millionaires overnight for sure, but it doesn't have to be the point where you're literally sitting in a hospital bed on an IV drip, etc. Or it doesn't mean that you have to go from burnout to stress to a full-blown mental health diagnosis. I don't think that's appropriate in any way. And you can still have a successful business. I just at time of recording just had an operation and was in hospital for the last few days. And I've watched more Netflix than I have in my entire life, literally in the last 5 days. But listen, one of my clients just surpassed $1 million. I'm still getting new clients signing up. You can still binge watch Netflix, right? And still have a successful business. You don't have to work hard. You just have to work smart, I do believe with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think with Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V to blame for the whole hustle culture mentality, which I think is just a bunch of bullshit. Totally agree also that, there's parts of your business journey where you do need to put in those extra hours and work hard. But if you're not putting in the framework of a 40-hour week where you don't have a sustainable business and you are going to burn out, and I've certainly come close to that, if not have burned out a few times in the last 22 years in business myself. So totally agree. You've got to find that balance. And it's a bit of a trap for young players, people getting into it, because they do think you've got to win, do brute force as opposed to working smart and being adequately capitalized so you can get the resources other people around you. So totally agree.
100%. See, so that's what I do. Help women make more money is ultimately what I do. And I do that through one-on-one VIP programs. I've got a mastermind. I've got an accelerator program. And I also run Australia's leading women in business retreat every year. So so that's how I rock and roll.
That's great. I've had quite a few guests on as well that have talked about burnout. Tina Tower, I think she was episode 40. She talked about, she had adrenal failure because she was working just so hard, flat out.
Yeah, Tina's a friend of mine, so yes, I know Tina well.
Right. Yeah, and Kylie Scott from Cumulus Architects here in Tasmania, the leading architectural firm, episode 25. Yeah, she talks in that cast about how stress at work kicked off, or they found out that she was had a serious health condition. I think it was MS from memory. So you've really got to watch, how much time you put in and effort into your work. Otherwise, it can literally kill you.
100%. I mean, and key factors that I always say to people to look for is in order for me to diagnose someone with, major depression or anxiety or whatever is in adults, it needs to be happening in all three areas of your life. So in us, it's typically work and or business, home and community. And for kids, it's school, community, and home. And so if it's not happening in all three areas, typically there's a root cause in one of those areas. If you can get to the root cause, you can kind of typically figure out what's going on. But if it starts impacting all three areas, and if you're listening out there going like, oh, it's impacting my relationship, it's impacting this, it's impacting that, then again, I would be very mindful and also really remembering that it typically will start off with stress. So like I could have been stressed this morning going, where's the Zoom link, right? Like a little bit of stress, but it goes away. Yeah. Burnout, things start to feel a little bit heavier. You start to resent showing up to the office. You might not want to deal with your clients. Like everything just feels harder. And then there comes to a point where like you just pretty much just want to throw in the towel, right? If you're getting to that stage, I always encourage you to make contact with your GP, speak to a family member if possible, because again, in Australia, 8 people take their life every single day, and it is way too many. We actually have more deaths in Australia in particular from suicide than we do from roadside accident, but yet more money gets dished into road accidents than it does in mental health. We're talking like thousands of numbers. So
I think it's the biggest killer of males under 40 in Australia is suicide, which is amazing. And just back on that point of stress, there's 2 types of stress. There's eustress and de-stress. Or obviously the latter is bad for you. You're always stressed out in the negative connotation of that. But eustress is the good stress, which comes from loving what you do, having a really good flow in your work, etc. But you've got to be mindful of the difference between those two, because distress obviously can be very bad for you.
100%. You also have to be mindful too that the way it can feel good can also be bad. So I've got Florida ADHD, so I can really get into a zone by a thing called hyperfocus, for example, where I literally can hyperfocus on something for 3 or 4 hours. I won't eat, I won't go to the bathroom, like I'm just in my zone, but I'm mindful and have insight that that's a hyperfocus period. If you though are borderlining, say you've had limited sleep, you're not eating, it's impacting all 3 areas of your life, and now you're staying up for 15, 16, 24 hours day after day, we're probably sitting more on a manic state. So even though it probably feels really good and you almost feel like on a high, it can actually be quite detrimental because your decision-making capacity is going to be potentially flawed. You could be spending copious amounts of money because it's another symptom of mania, etc. So it's about being mindful and really leaning into the feeling part of yourself. And that's where I find a lot of entrepreneurs are just going from one thing to the next, another tick list, tick it off, tick it off, tick it off. Whereas if you can start to lean into what is feeling good for you, feeling bad for you, that's when you're going to start to know what excites you, what doesn't excite you, what you get rid of, and what's in alignment. Because to me, whenever you start to see burnout, people can't see, but as I'm moving my hands, is the more burnout you have, the more unaligned you are. And so things, if you think about alignment, things are within a line, but the more burnout, the line goes further and further away. So if, again, you are sitting on that burnout stage at the moment, I'd be asking yourself, where are things unaligned? Is it within your marriage? Is it within your relationship with your children? Is it within your team? Is it within yourself? And so a lot of questions to ask.
On ADHD, I've had at least 2 business partners that I know that have diagnosed ADHD, and one more recently, who's a good friend of mine, absolutely fucking infuriating to work with. The hyperfocus, is that because we've obviously talked with him and coached him for years about doing something about it, which he has done recently with medication, but the hyperfocus, is that something that can you maybe talk to that, how someone with ADHD may utilize that?
Yeah, so again, I think it's really important too is that ADHD presents so differently in so many different people, in particularly women and men's differentials is very different. And so that's why we're actually seeing a huge increase of women being diagnosed over the age of 40 now. I actually just did my own, I had a live event just recently where I brought on Denise Duffield-Thomas and Cherie from the Digital Picnic, and we've all recently been diagnosed within our 40s with the ADHD component. But because girls would typically have inattentive ADHD is where we're we're a little bit more quiet. We're not blurting out answers. We're not jumping up and down. We're not necessarily cutting people off. It's just kind of, it was so more like we were pushed under the table because there wasn't a problem. We weren't interfering with things, right? But what happens is though, is our car keys were still going missing, or we were still losing our book bags, for example. And you can also be really disorganized in many parts of it too. And so hyper-focus though is when you really like something that you're doing and you're just kind of in the zone. So for example, Denise talked about it at my live event that, she recorded 33 podcast episodes in 2 days.
Wow.
Right. So she just went in, she had the room booked, she had her topics out, and she didn't stop until she knew it was done. And she's like, great, well, there's over 6 months worth of recording, because her podcast is a solo podcast, but she knew, but as soon as that hyper-focus period you come out of, what happens is you don't want to talk about it again. It's done. So in Denise's example, she's like, great. She's like, here's to her team. Here are the 33 podcast episodes. You name the titles, you stitch everything together, you market it, but my job is done. Because once we're finished, we are very, what's the word? That's where shiny object can come. We've done what we're excited about, but we need something new, that kind of that dopamine hit, right? Also, medication can work well for some people. Denise and Cherie are both on medication. I tested medication and it just didn't work for me. It actually slowed me down to a point of detriment. And I was like, I remember the first day I tried Ritalin. I actually, because I used to work with the Ipswich mental health team here in Queensland, reached out to my friends. I was like, man, I used to be able to like pump 5-6 blog articles out in a day. I was like, I'm still working on article number 1. And they're like, oh no, that's just a normal human's brain. That's just like, that's what normal people would be able to do. And I'm like, well, this is how it's going to be like. I actually didn't like the slowness. But also in my instance, for example, is I always had lists growing up. So people actually are really surprised that I can hold space for the amount of consulting I do because I have my attention. Yep. But the reality of it is because I borderline another diagnosis of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, because I'm so organized that I don't miss appointments. I'm always on time, but it can be a point of detriment because then I get annoyed when others aren't on time and things like that. So I've had to learn coping strategies because I wasn't diagnosed back then, but I was losing things. My assignments weren't getting done. So it can look so different for everyone. So medication can work, but again, it can really mess with people's relationships, partners, as in like marital partners, business partners, for example, relationships with your kids, right? There's a lot of things that if you don't have the insight to that's what's going on, it can be quite detrimental.
Yeah, totally. Last point on ADHD, there is one benefit that I've found working with people, particularly this one friend, that if he raises something that I don't really want to talk about, I kick a shiny object down the road and he chases after it and we stop talking about the thing I didn't want to talk about. That's about the only benefit. Yeah,
I mean, listen, I think there's like, again, once you know about your ADHD and how you can harness it, I actually think people with ADHD, it's our superpower generally. And so many entrepreneurs I know have ADHD. And the more we talk about it, I mean, in fact, that piece around ADHD, we've been picked up by Smart Company, Women's Agenda, and I can't remember the other PR piece that we've been picked up on because people are like, oh my gosh, thank goodness people are talking about this. And so for both, I mean, Denise will make, I don't know, 3.5 million this year in her business. Cherie has a team of 19 full-time of employees at the Digital Picnic, and I'm a 7-figure business owner. Like, I don't think I would be where I am. And I would say the girls would also say they probably wouldn't be where they're at without the ADHD. But it's about harnessing and understand where your strengths are, where your limitations are, and hiring the right people around you that are willing to keep up with you and rock and roll.
Absolutely. Tell our audience how you started out.
Yeah, so I started off in business. It's been a while now. My son was 9 months old, so about 11 and a half years ago, just playing on the floor with him, a bunch of different toys that were given to us, but they were all electronic. And I just remember as my social worker hat, there's got to be other toys out there. Don't get me wrong, my kids, yes, watch iPad and we go to movies and there's always electricity and electronic toys, but I just thought at 9 months, there's going to be a better way. So I started looking for other educational products that I couldn't find in the major stores. And I started reaching out to independent designers, et cetera, around the world. And that's how I started my first business, which is named after my son, Finley, and me, where we focused on creating childhood memories through play, love, and travel. Again, as any business, we start off with 0 followers, 0 email, etc. At one stage, our email list was close to 60,000. We had about 70,000 people following us on Facebook, another 20,000 following us on Instagram. But also I started blogging for the mothers that were buying from me. So I talked about the loneliness of motherhood, anxiety and depression postnatal, and things like that, because I had the skills to speak about that. And through that, though, I then became one of Australia's leading influencers and bloggers. I was signed with Netflix as one of their top 30 influencers here in Australia and New Zealand. I work with other brands like Spotlight, Coles, Woolies, Club Meds, Hilton's, and a variety of other places who wanted me to, they wanted my audience, but they wanted me, they wanted my voice. Mm-hmm. And so they paid me for that. So that's where I first also started learning about the importance of different income streams. Yep. And not being reliant on one income stream, because you just never know when things are going to go sour. Yeah. And so that was a really interesting point. So yeah, so that's where I started. And then being a social worker and a bit of a giver, I didn't understand what, like, the method that people talk about, pick your brain, which really now that I do know is like, can I get free advice from you? Mm-hmm. So in a matter of 2 months, I had like 14 coffee dates with people. And I just remember driving home this one day going like, I can't keep driving 30 minutes one way, 30 minutes back, sitting for an hour, paying for my own Diet Coke. I don't even drink coffee. I was like, you know, I'm almost like, this is like a bit of taking the piss here. It's like, I was like, if I would have charged these people for my expertise, I could have a secondary business. So both of the businesses were never part of the plan. They just kind of evolved. And then I thought, well, I'll test this consulting side of the thing out. Again, I'd never consulted. I'd done therapy and stuff before with clients as a mental health clinician. So I was like, well, if you take this skill set and merge it with listening and human compassion, then you might. And yeah, now I've worked with thousands of women around the world, you know, consulting. So that's where it started and where we're at now.
That's great. And what year, did you start Finley and Me, and how old were you then?
Yeah, so Finley and Me, we started in 2010. So Finley was born in 2009. So it was around that 9-month mark. So 2010, roughly, we started in September. Yep. So that would have been 2009. What are we? I'm 42 at time of recording. So I would have been roughly around 30, give or take, when I first started out. So yeah.
Right. And you started the consulting in a serious way and the coaching in 2016?
It was closer. It was probably more 2017. So 2016, I tested like one client. Yep. And then I was like, and then 2017, we got a website, messaging, you know, packages, offers, all of that. But yeah, so closer to 2017. So yeah.
That's great. Do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of, I guess, both businesses?
Yeah, I mean, key numbers, obviously, goodness, Finley and Me. I mean, again, email list of 50,000 plus, 69,000 at one stage. We actually cracked 70,000, then we went under, but 70,000 people on Facebook, 20,000 people on Instagram. I mean, those are metric numbers. We did hit 7 figures collectively within the business model too. You know, oh goodness, I'd have to go back to our Google Analytics data, but I mean, tens of thousands of people hitting our website every single month, looking at our blog articles too, which again, SEO optimized, bring the traffic over on one thing and convert them on the other end. Yep. So that was, you know, that was it. In regards to Angela Henderson Consulting, I mean, listen, I have a podcast that's been going every week for the last 3.5 years called the Business and Life Conversations podcast. We've had just under 70,000 downloads on that. We've got a Facebook community that started with 0, and we're about to hit 10,000 people in there, called the Women in Business Collaborative. Our email list sits at about 7,000 there, because we do clean that out quite regularly. But I think, again, it's when we talk about numbers, I think it's also very important to understand how are those numbers utilized. Because, for example, my podcast, I guest podcast on probably 50 to 70 podcasts a year. And I know for a fact for every one person I reckon for every 10 podcasts I'm on, 9 of those podcasts have better numbers than I do. And they've been either going for a shorter amount of time, etc. But I can equally say, because I'm friends with a lot of these people, is they might have more downloads, but they're making way less money than what I am. So I think it's important that when you look at numbers, it's important about how are those numbers working for you versus being vanity, do you know what I mean? Like a metric, like a vanity metric, right? Same thing with, like, I could have 25,000 people on my email list right now, and the ego would be very happy to be like, yeah, I've got 25,000, but my open rate and my click-through rate would go down. Whereas I've got 7,000 people on my email list because we clean it out regularly, and our open rate sits at about 26, 27% on any given week. point, which is really great for my industry, right?
That is.
So it's about understanding how those metrics need to be used versus just the bigger numbers.
Yeah. What about full-time equivalent team members? I assume it started as yourself and
yeah, so it started off as myself, but I've always been because I still worked full time as a mental health clinician for 40 hours, I was never afraid to start outsourcing sooner rather than later. Also understanding what my zone of genius is and where it begins and where it ends. So it's equivalent to 2 full-timers, but I know before we hit record, it's for me important for the audience to still know about hiring the right people for the right jobs and getting the right people on the bus.
Yeah.
So I do have an online business manager who works 10 hours a week. I've got 2 VAs who also work 10 hours each. I've got a marketing coordinator 10 hours a week, and I've got a content coordinator for 10 hours a week. And that's not to mention my podcast team, my SEO team, my Facebook team, or my Pinterest team.
Yeah.
So again, it's not huge equivalency, but I think there's a lot of myths around you. Just because you make more, you need a large team. I'm here to disagree on that.
No, I
you
agree.
get the right people in there.
Very smart, Angela. You're obviously a 7-figure business and you've got FTE of 2 other people in it, so that's extremely high margin, which I think Tina also talked about in her podcast as well, when she moved away from the child after school tutoring for kids and the stores that she had into and franchising into online business. Yeah, she spoke very much about that as well.
Yeah. Again, you might pay a little bit more, but I do think overall you're saving more. For example, there is this, I won't name names, but I had asked to speak at this. I put my hat in the ring to speak at this particular event. And I was told that I didn't hit a certain threshold. And I said, okay, fair enough. But this particular person had actually released their data at the end of that particular year. So they had made 2 million, I think, which was great. But what I liked about this person was that they were willing to share their data, right? But of the 2 million, their profit margin was sitting at 10%.
Right.
So they were spending, I think, again, I don't have that in front of me, but it would have been close to about 750,000 alone she was spending just on wages for team.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. But then when I looked at it, I was like, well, at that stage, this is earlier on, 2 or 3 years ago in my consulting. And I was like, okay. But theoretically, I was sitting at like a 40% margin for profit at that stage. Mm-hmm. So I also think it's important when you start looking at, and when businesses are like, oh, such and such hit 7-figure, a launch, such and such. Yeah. A lot of these people will hit 7-figure launches, but they spent $990,000 on advertising, team, strategy, etc. So their profit is only 10, and that's a huge $10,000. That's a huge risk as far as I'm concerned. And so just being mindful again about how numbers are presented, and never be afraid to ask for people, again, if you're going to work with someone or anything like that, to ask for either further numbers or detail, because there's smoke and mirrors out there.
When was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
I mean, it's a good question. I guess for me, though, and this isn't sound like a cocky douchebag, but failure was never an option, right? So for me, everything felt successful. But I would say if I had to kind of name one thing, it was more success in knowing that I could tell the boss to fuck off if they did, at any given moment, right? So even though I still worked full time, and I probably would still be there, but due to workplace bullying, and I actually suffered from my own anxiety and depression during all of this, not because of work burnout, as in my business burnout, but because of workplace bullying, is knowing that I had control of where I was going and that I had choice. Yes. And that's the thing is I think people forget that at the end of the day, you are responsible for the outcomes in your life.
That's right.
And at the end of every day, or when you wake up every day, you have choice on how your world is going to work, but yet people aren't willing to take responsibility. So for me, that kind of aha moment going, okay, yes, I've had this safety net of 4 weeks annual leave, 4 weeks, 2 weeks sick leave, public holidays. And I also bought 4 weeks of annual leave. As I was actually only at work for about 7.5 months out of the year, but still had this wage coming in. But knowing that I wasn't dependent on someone else anymore was kind of when I felt like this is good. Even if I might not hit the threshold and the numbers I want, the reality of it is. And I know when COVID came, my family members projecting their own do you know what I mean, money shit on me.
Yep.
Oh my God, you're going to be the first thing people get rid of.
Yep.
Actually, I've made more money in the pandemic than I ever have before, because more people wanted to shift online. More people actually wanted to quit their 9-to-5 cult jobs, right?
Stop
And
working
they
for
wanted,
ourselves.
yeah, exactly right. They wanted to work for themselves. So that was probably I can't say like I was driving down the road and came to it. It was more of a feeling, knowing that I truly was like really genuinely in control and really taking responsibility for my life.
That's great. What does success look like to you?
Listen, success, to me, it's impact is what it is I need to know that when I die, and it could happen tomorrow, it could happen whenever, is that when people show up for my funeral, people know that there is an impact ripple effect. It wasn't just chasing this 7-figure empire dream that people put out to the world. It was about how did Angela treat people with kindness first. And that's where I'm very big about human to human marketing, which is around the experience and interaction one faces with a particular brand. And I'm very much about every client I literally, when I say this, my numbers are small. I work with about 100 different women on any given week, but I can tell you, I know they're married, how many children they have, where they live, because we've got systems set up, because people are not just a number to me. So for me, that's, do you know what I mean, is knowing when people are at my funeral, knowing that, again, success is I've made an impact, as in I've left either a legacy or I've made people feel like people and feel like they've been seen. That could be the impact. So depending on how people define impact, that's what I would say.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
Have conversations.
Have conversations.
Have conversations. People are too worried about the next transaction, chasing the fucking dollar, chasing the dollar. Again, if the sooner you can start to learn to have more conversations lead to connections. And when you infuse conversations with connections, you will equal conversions.
Yeah.
If you're generally here for long-term growth, this is a long-term strategy. This is not a quick fix. But there's no doubt in my mind that I am where I am, and I am as connected as I am, and I've had the opportunities as I am, because I took time to get to know people.
Yeah. I think especially in this day and age, not just in marketing, but in business and life, I guess also especially after COVID, a lot of people reassess their life, and not just work, but their life, and realize relationships are how important they are. So, having genuine conversations and being authentic, I know it's touted around a bit these days, but it comes back to that. People buy from people.
They do. And as though I actually think from when I first started in business, I don't think I know from now, I do believe that be authentic, do this is talked about, but people aren't actually doing it. I think it's a very much like a fucking cliche. Look at me. I'm having conversations. Actually, no, you're not. How do I know that? Well, of the 100 businesses I work with on any given week, I can tell you that people aren't doing it, right? Like they're not. And there's only 3 ways to gain visibility: organic visibility, partnership visibility, and paid visibility. If you're not infusing in any of those 3, there's going to be a deficit at some stage. And that's okay, because it has to be in alignment. But the great book, one of my most favorite books that I've ever read, and it was a privilege to have them on my own podcast, was The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann. And what they talk about there is the 5 laws of stratospheric success. And they're pretty much talking about leading with value. And don't chase the dollar, right? And they talk about the law of value, and they say your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. They then talk about the law of compensation. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. They then talk about the 3rd law, which is the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. The 4th law is the law of authenticity. The most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And the last law is the law of receptivity. The key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving.
Yeah.
The problem is because people are so worried, especially in startup, and I don't want to minimize the stress of startup, but there's stress in every level of business.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be something that we have to, figure out. But the sooner that you can lead with value truly in business and not worry just about the transaction, again, your energy flows. You start to attract the right people into your space, right? It's a really quite a beautiful thing. So though it might have taken me longer to get to where I'm at, I'm still here.
Yep.
And I can say most businesses fail and they're gone. So clearly what I'm doing for both businesses has worked and continues to pay off, even though I haven't hit $3 million in 1 year yet.
Yep.
Right. But I'm always about leading with value. But I'll say one other thing. You also have to think about your human design. And I'm only really getting into human design and understanding that a little bit more and about our energetic blueprint and what that looks like. I'm a connector. I like humans. I prefer working with smaller, intimate groups of people, but not all of us are like that. So it's important about truly understanding what ticks and works for you, but it doesn't mean that you still can't lead with value, even if you want to have 5,000 people in a launch.
Mm-hmm.
You can always still add and lead with value without and putting other people's interests first before your credit card, your credit card, your credit card.
How did you fund your business?
Yeah, so when we first started with Finley and me, it pretty much came down to savings and credit card.
Yep.
That was it. And I knew, and that's why, again, I actually say to people, do not quit your 9-to-5 job, because I knew that we would still have paid holidays, paid sick leave, paid everything else. I still had a job to fund everything. So that, again, worked wonders for us. I've also used PayPal loans. In the last 5 years, I've taken out 5 PayPal loans to get to where I am. And there's no doubt that, again, strategically, I use those loans in a very strategic manner in order to get my business to where it is. So podcast agency, Pinterest specialist, SEO team, etc. They were all strategically driven. Also, the export grant here in Australia. I mean, I just lodged my export grant for the last 2 years. I'm about to get 60K back into my account for all marketing.
Is that that's for Finley and me?
No, so that's for Angela Henderson Consulting. So collectively, so Finley and me, we pretty much use savings and credit.
Yep.
And then again, once we started making the money, all that then was able to be paid off. And then with Angela Henderson Consulting, there's been times too, whereas if I know that I want to start running Facebook ads, but at the same time Pinterest ads, and at the same time hire my current coach who cost me $45K to work with him, I've got no problems taking out a $60K loan from PayPal. PayPal is one of the easiest ways to grow your business.
Yeah, I was going to ask
the least amount of stress.
That's a great nugget for the audience, I think. I was going to ask specifically about PayPal. I didn't even know they did loans for business.
Oh my God, dude. It's like, I don't encourage anyone to go into debt. Let me be very clear about that.
There's good and bad debt, obviously.
But again, if you are working with someone in the space of consulting and you understand that it's calculated risk and where your ROI is and things like that, there's risk in any decision that we make on any given day. But when I pulled out the PayPal loans over the last couple of years, what I specifically was doing was working with my export grant specialist to get all my marketing things approved, because I knew I'd be able to claim it back in the grant.
Yeah.
So though I was out of pocket over the last couple of years, 150K in marketing particularly, I knew I would be getting about 60 to 80K back.
Yeah.
That to me is a smart decision. It's freaking free money that the export grant gives me here in Australia. So again, yes, I knew the risk was going into it, but how I've been able to leverage it is 40% of my, traffic to my website comes from SEO. So I'm not dependent on Facebook or Instagram if I got shut down tomorrow.
Yeah,
yes, I'd still take a hit in revenue, but 42 to 44 people out of every 100 are still finding me every month via the internet.
Fantastic. Just on back on PayPal, sorry, the loan, what kind of interest rate are they charging at the moment? So
it's not an interest rate. So what it is you enter into an agreement with them based on 4 kind of stages on how you want to pay them back. Do you want to pay them? So I'll give you, if $1,000 enters my account and I chose to pay them back at 15%, they would take $150.
Yeah.
And then they would deposit the remainder into my account.
Got it.
But you can do 15% payback, 20% payback, 25% payback, or 30% payback.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on what level you choose of paying them back will be a set fee that you enter into. So it's not necessarily a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is you enter into a 90-day payback agreement.
Yep.
So, I took out a 60K loan last year. And this is the other thing is I'm very conservative. Yes, the money was in my account, but I would rather always have money in my account than, do you know what I mean, paying everything up front. It's just the way my brain works, and my parents have filed bankruptcy twice. So I always like to know there's cash where that needs to be.
Yep.
So even with that 60K, was taken out, it was paid back within 300 days. I chose the 20% thing. And I think of the 60K, I think the fee was about 3,800 is what I paid on that.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And my monthly repayment that I needed to pay was about 3,300 every 3 months. So it was really only 1,100 a month, which is about 250 a week.
Yeah.
So I'm like, again, worst case scenario, would I have enough sales coming in to pay them back 250 a week?
Yep.
Okay, yes. If no, would I have enough money in my savings, in my, mortgage or whatever, if worst case scenario happened, to pay them back? Yes. But the thing with PayPal, Stripe now has loans too. Stripe has only just come out with their own loans over the last kind of 6 months, I think it is. But the beautiful thing is they see your transactions.
Yeah, I was going to say, for PayPal, you would obviously have to be banking with them for a while or using them as a gateway.
Yes and no. But the thing is you can just go to PayPal Capital. You enter into your PayPal. You'll click on the PayPal Capital. You can apply right then before entering into anything, and they would tell you how much you could get right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And so the thing there is like, what I say to people, if you know that, yes, you'd ideally like 20, enter into a $3,000 payment back with them. Show them that you've paid them off, because every time after I've paid them off, I'm almost getting double back because they know I've never missed a payment. They know that I'm good for the money. They see the money coming through, right? So the risk is really quite low to PayPal. They've also got your bank account attached to it. So in the event that they don't get it from PayPal, they're going to get it from your bank account. Yeah. And it's been so stress-free, because you literally fill in your details, click a button, go agree, and it's done. Versus if you start to deal with the banks, you have to show 900 pieces of paperwork.
Oh, how fucking annoying are banks.
So annoying. And then you've got to drive to the appointment, then they're late, then you've got to drive back. And I'm like, to me, time is money. And I know it's a cliche statement, but it is, do you know what I mean? It is money. Yep. And so for me, that's why I love PayPal. Yes, I may have paid a higher fixed rate, but the convenience that it's over and done with, literally within probably 3 minutes, and there's zero exaggeration, from the time you apply to the time it's done, in 24 hours, the money's in your account. That's great. Well, just on the math, the $3,800 for 60 grand is 6.3%. You had it for about 300 days. So, gross that up, it's about 8% per annum. That's still pretty good for a business loan. And like I said, it's I don't encourage people to go into debt, but there were certain things that I knew I could do and grow quicker, knowing that, again, that money was coming back from the grant. So like I said, I literally just submitted my export grant information on Monday at time of recording, and that's going to them for just under 60K, which for those people who live in Australia and aren't aware of the export grant, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you with my grant expert. But the reality of it is that, like, people think export is they've got to be a physical product has to go. But as long as you're marketing overseas and bringing in revenue back into the Australian economy, you can get money for this. See, that's exactly what I thought, Angela, because we've used it before in businesses before, but I've always had it in my mind. It's got to be a physical product that we ship. But of course, export can be services. And I know quite a few people that I'm going to mention this to and send this cast to. Yeah, no, it's an absolutely epic thing. And now they've done the export grant differently moving into 2022, where you have to almost forecast, you have to show them the next 3 years of your marketing plan, and they will pre-approve you. Whereas the one that I just lodged yesterday is that you don't get pre-approval, you just submit it and they pay you, where I think they're probably there's more people getting more clued on. Export grant in Australia has been around, I think, for 25 years now. Yeah, great. But there's so many businesses on any given week that know nothing about it, and they are like, oh my God, Ange, this is a game changer. It's like most businesses though, grants, I mean, I do feel for the governments, it is a hard job, but a lot of businesses just don't understand what grants are out there, like the entrepreneurs grant. I'm not sure if you're aware of that one. That's if you're doing over 1.5 million top line, you can get a $20,000 grant. It's match funding, so you've got to put another 20 grand into a project. It's not for every business, but for a lot of sectors are covered. And that grant is entitled. It's not competitive. As long as you meet their criteria, which includes 1.5 top line and the main industries they cover, you get that 20 grand to go for it again 3 years later. And even if you get that one, there's the accelerator grant after that, which is another 20 grand. So, but a lot of businesses just don't know about it. Yeah. Or again, like I said, I'm not encouraging people to go into debt, but if you knew in 12 months time that if you put $50,000 into marketing and you knew you could double your revenue, let's just say, but you also actually would not be doubling your revenue, it would be more than that. Because if you think about the reimbursement you're going to get from your government, it's actually a very small amount of money that has to go into your growth. But then again, the problem is you've got to, with the export grant, is you've got to front the money up front, right? Yeah. So that's why the PayPal loan has helped me out with still keeping my monies in the bank reserved, because I was like, technically, like, yeah, I guess it's 3,000 whatever dollars, but it's quite small in the grand scheme of things for a business growth strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yes. Mm-hmm. 100%. And the reason why I would is because I'm passionate about getting more wealth into the hands of women and making sure that women around the world have access to the tools, community, and resources they need. And I'm a mentor for the Queensland State Government program here in Queensland. And we know with some of the data, when women in particular were asked what was it that they failed, and it was his lack of financial resources and lack of being able to access quality people that could actually help them to move their businesses forward. So knowing that data has really driven me to go, okay, well, not everyone can afford to work with me in a paid capacity, but what can I do is I provide an enormous amount of value inside of my free Facebook group. It's a free group and there's so much stuff that goes on in there. I provide free webinars. I provide a blog article every week. I provide a new podcast every week. There's an enormous amount of different ways to still get tools, community, and resources if you're at that startup stage and can't afford it. Yep. Whereas then if you can start affording it, there's other ways to work with me too. So 100%, I would still be in the same field.
Excuse me. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah, my biggest one that I learned was, listen, first of all, I reframe mistakes with lessons. Everything that has happened to me is a lesson if you choose to look for the lesson and how that can help you grow and look for better opportunity. So every mistake is a lesson that I've needed to get to where I'm at. But the biggest mistake, AKA lesson, was everyone kept telling me to take, because we had 1,400 different products in our online business with about 60% stock we hold, 40% was drop shipping. Is to move everything out of the house and get it into like a third-party logistics company. And it all sounded very great, right? I would move everything out of my house. I would have a little bit more of my space back, right? People wouldn't be coming and working, and packing orders and all that. But what the third-party logistics company either failed to tell me or I didn't go and look further was that the shelf life of a product. So a lot of our products would move very, very quickly, which was great. And that's what you would want when you're looking at a third-party distribution logistics center, right? But being new to that, I wasn't aware of that. So a lot of our products too were seasonal, Christmas, Easter, Father's Day, etc. So what happened is those products were just sitting on the shelves and I was still having to pay a shelving fee every week. And so then what happens is I started to go in the red on particular products. So after probably only 9 months of being at the third-party logistics company, we had to move everything back because it just wasn't business smart. Yep. And it wasn't smart based on how many products we had to keep half of our products at the third-party logistics and half home, because then we would be shipping out 2 shipping lots. And then from there, what would happen is that we would lose money on shipping, right? Mm-hmm. Not to mention potential increase in admin and a variety of other things, because now you're dealing with a higher risk of packages going missing because they're going out from 2 different places versus 1. Yep. So for me, that was a really big learning curve, is really understanding and asking more questions when you're entering into anything, let alone big or small. But in that instance, it was a massive stress for, like a massive stress, because then I had to put shelving all back up. We had to bring everything home. I had to then get it, it was, it could have made or break me if we wouldn't have made that decision quicker. I also talk about hire fast, fire faster. Yeah. And that was one of the things, is if I had to do it again, it's okay, great. I hired them, but I should have fired them faster than what I did. Yep. So you kind of, and that goes down to, I think, just growing that intuitive muscle that you have and following your gut. A lot of times is people want to know the how-tos and do this and do it via book or step by step, but sometimes intuitively something's not right and you're going to need to make that call sooner rather than later.
Just back on learning from your mistakes, reminds me of one of my favorite Henry Ford quotes: "The only real mistake is the one from which we learn nothing." Mm-hmm. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I would probably say the healing element and the energy element of it. In the last 3.5 years, I've had 5 significant people die in my life. My grandmother died on Christmas. My brother died on Mother's Day. A father type figure died on New Year's Day. Another business friend died 2 weeks after that in the beginning of January, and recently a best friend. So there's been a lot of significant death. And so what I've had to learn really hard about is strategy will get you so far. And 100%, I will always back strategy, but strategy means nothing if you don't take action. So that's only going to get you so far. But if you're not in tune and willing to work on the messiness, the mindset, the healing, or whatever on the inside, your external world is a direct reflection of your internal world. And so as a business owner, no one wants to have to deal with the messiness. No one has to deal with what happened in childhood. No one wants to deal with any of that type of stuff. But the reality of it is it goes hand in hand. So so over the last, more 18 to 24 months, I've worked with healers, I've worked with hypnotherapists, and it's and especially in the last 12 months, we've increased our revenue by just under 300,000. It's no direct. You can't say that it's not a direct correlation of the healing and internal work that I've done, right? Yeah. So I would say, has it been the easiest? No, but it's something I encourage all my clients to do. Now that I know more about it over the last 3 years, it's one of the things I push at the very beginning. This is all well and good, but these money blocks keep coming up. The self-sabotage keep coming up. The imposter syndrome keeps coming up. Until you nip this in the ass, it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. So what do we need to do internally first?
Yeah. What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
I'd probably say people management. Is you go from solopreneur, having everything in your head. In many ways that does work to some degree, going into CEO, and now you become a people manager. And not all of us are equipped to be good people managers. I'm kind of like, I'm paying you, go do your job, fucking do it. But a lot of people,
that's how I'm wired too.
Yeah, and I'm like, whereas a lot of people want to be like, good morning, how's your day, how's your dog? And that's okay. Yeah. It's nothing wrong with that person, but I'm not the right person to do that. Yeah. So that's why by having my online business manager, he's really good with checking in with the team and making sure that there's this. And of course I show up to the team meetings and I ask them how they are, but it's just not my strength. And I know it's not my zone of genius. Yeah. So for me, that was probably the hardest. And also just accepting that I'm not the right, that doesn't need to be part of my job description, even though everyone will tell you that that's your job description. Totally no, you agree. Get to make up your job description.
That's it. What do you love most about growing a small business?
Listen, I just love continuing to see everyone grow, right? And it doesn't necessarily just mean grow from a financial point of view, is in like growing their confidence, right? There's this notion that everyone's chasing a 7-figure business. When did it stop being okay to be happy with a 100K business? When did it stop being okay with 200Ks and being able to go and sit and enjoy your child's ballet and sit in the sunshine and read a book? Where did we lose the essence of being able to slow down? Right? There's something magical about that, I think. So for me is I love seeing people truly kind of leaning into creating a business that they genuinely want, not what they think they need to have. Yeah. So again, knowing like, hey, Ange, today I've been able to take every Friday off for the last 6 months, and that's helped on my mental health. Fuck yeah, right? Yeah. And sometimes too, they'll try and minimize. I know they might say things like, oh, you might not be, like one lady said to me recently, you might not be proud, or I don't think you're proud of me because I haven't hit an X amount of financial figure yet. And I said, well, hold on, where have I ever said that? Yes. And she's like, actually, no, you've never said that. I've made that story up, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm exceptionally proud that you've stayed true to who you are, that your mental health is getting better, that you're still making sales and still having growth. It might not be rapid growth, but it's still growth. So I really like seeing women truly honing in on what lights them up and makes them excited, and understanding that their chapter 1 is different to someone chapters 30, right? And that you don't want my success. I would say to anyone, And I know people say, oh, I want what you have. No, you don't, because it wouldn't work for you and your personality and your family. What do you want? So that always lights me up. Like, yes, the woman who's putting her mental health as a priority and still growing her business, to the person, my client who just hit 1 million, to my client that we canceled everything last year and she made 2.2 million off of a $37 product. Like, all of it lights me up, right? So that's the joy when I receive those messages.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Biggest mindset shift. Listen, I'd always say, and a lot of people say, I think I've always had a quite strong mindset, but what I would say is my biggest mindset shift would be that energetic shift, right? There's more to business than just strategy. Yep. There's more to business than even just alignment, and really just staying true to, are you doing things that light you up? Are you doing things as you think you told yourself? If you're doing things that you're not energetically aligned with, you're going to start to get resentment, attract the wrong fucking people. Yep. The list goes on. So that was probably my biggest mindset shift, is really embracing the energetic side of things.
What is the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I don't have any habits. So I guess I'm probably not the right person to ask, because my ADHD brain isn't something, it's not that I can't not do it, but when I've tried to do it before, the shame and the constant, like, for example, I'll take one thing back. Every night before I go to bed, I will say the 3 things that I'm grateful for in my life. And I do believe gratitude has played a pretty significant role over the last few years, especially with the significant deaths. So I would say my one thing that I do constantly, because it's the easiest thing that I can do, is just, I'm laying in bed every night, no matter what, and my brain is going a million miles an hour. What can I do to comment? So that's what I would say. But when I was starting to like fucking write, I don't know, do 84 affirmations, do meditation every day, I just felt the pressure was too much. Yep. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, find something simple that works for you. Don't do what others are telling you to do.
Do you love talking small business growth with other owners? We have a vibrant online community from many industries around the world. Plus, we regularly add new tools and resources for community members and host 2 webinars a month to help you grow your small business. growsmallbusiness.com.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah, in regards to team, again, hire fast, fire faster. Mm-hmm. Understand what others' true zone of genius is. Make sure that you're speaking to your team and understanding. A lot of times people will say yes in an interview because they want the job. Yep. And so they agree to all these tasks, but making sure that you're checking in with them to make sure that still lights them up. Yep. There's been a couple of team members over the last year where they're like, okay, when I get to the 2-month mark, are you still enjoying this? I still really like this, but this doesn't light me up. I'll do it. No, hold on a minute. Can we take this off you and give it to someone else? Can we create a new role? Yep. So though I'm not a people manager, still listening to what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And again, making sure that they know they're valued. I might not be a good people manager in regards to like the, hi, how are you? How's the dog? But, one of my team members in Canada, I mean, she's a contractor. I knew money was tight. She went off to have her second baby. I paid for her full wage for 6 weeks. I didn't have to do that, but that's my way of I still want them to know that they're cared for. Yeah. Same things with Christmas gifts. Like, I reached out to the team. I'm like, listen, guys, I've been working hours on trying to get you the most perfect gift, and I'm not going to send you a freaking candle and a bath bomb. Give me 3 of your top 3 things. Like, I really want them to feel like that they're listened to and heard, even though I'm still not that people manager.
Yeah, good. What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Listen, I don't necessarily think I've nailed that one yet. I think it's something that's a work in progress, is what I would say. But what I would say is weekly team meetings have helped immensely over the last 18 to 24 months. Meeting with my online business manager at the beginning of every week has helped. Every week helps. I'd also we've got ClickUp, and we've got like a dashboard inside of ClickUp that we call like the water cooler. So we kind of go in there and tell a couple of jokes or a meme or something like that. Yep. So again, it's not perfect, but it's better. I think also COVID has restricted some of the things I normally would have done. So for example, I would have had no problem flying over the Canadians to Australia, or us Aussies going to Canada and having like face-to-face planning meetings. Zoom is great, but Zoom only gets you so far with a human connection. So I'm looking forward to that kind of changing up. I would say that's still a work in progress.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
First of all, I think balance is bullshit. So I call that is what I've had to learn is if you think of the true definition of balance, it's about equal distribution amongst whatever is in your world. There's never anything equally distributed. And so for me, I had to learn earlier on that when I was trying to be 10% with my husband, 10% with my kids, 10% with the business, 10% at work, 10% with my family, it was too much overwhelm and actually created more chaos in my world than more calm. So what I had to do is I had to replace the word balance with being present. When I'm with you today, I'm present with you. When I'm with my kids at night, my phone is off and I'm present with them. So it's not necessarily an equal distribution of time, but it's more that when I'm with people, I'm present in doing and with them. So, this year coming up in 2022, I've got 77 holiday days booked. That's not including my Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. And I can tell you that things will be arranged that when I'm back home in Canada or when I'm in Iceland or when I'm doing whatever, I will be present in those moments. So, yeah.
I think that's a really important point there, Angela, because especially in this day and age of digital distractions, not just business owners, but we can not be present with our kids, checking our phone all the time. I was at the park earlier this year with my daughter and I heard one kid on the swing saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." He's just standing there staring at his phone the whole time while swinging her, not being present. I think that's a really good insight, what you've shared there on balance.
So, yeah.
And how much professional development have you invested in yourself? Sounds like it's a shit ton.
Yeah, so I would say this year alone, probably 80 to 85K I've invested. And that includes healers, hypnotherapists, coaches. I'm always learning, and people, I think, underestimate that when people go to hire me, you're not just hiring me for my strategy. You're hiring me to access the connections that I've made. You're hiring to move quicker and faster. You're to get time back. I mean, there's a lot of variables when you hire someone to work with me, but I might not have a business degree from Yale, but I can tell you the amount of money I've put in over the last, it would be close to probably at least 750K over the last 11 years. Is the amount of knowledge I have is far more than what you get in a Yale paper degree, right? So, but people underestimate that, right? But, I'm always paying to learn from some of the top people in the spaces so that I can then take that knowledge back and give it back. But also my healing. If I'm not prepared to work on my own mindset and my own healing journey, then how can I be the best showing up for my clients?
Anything else on mentors or coaches?
No, and yes, as in listen, I think everyone needs well, first of all, I'd say you've got mentors, coaches, and consultants. I do look at things very differently. If you're a photographer, you might get another photographer who will mentor you about, lighting, color, composition, etc. It's typically informal. It's not normally paid and it's quite infrequent. Typically is how I see mentoring. It's not really set. Coaching, if you look at the true definition of coaching, it's about listening to someone, reframing it and putting it back to them to have their own aha moment. That's generally what coaching is. And consulting to me is more as people are coming to you for advice to get you quicker. I consider myself 75% consultant, 25% coach. Is people want to know, based on their business, their life, their alignment, whatever, what can they do to try and get there in a way that feels with ease and flow for them. And so again, I think it's important for you to decide, do you need a mentor, a coach, or a consultant in your world? And then I also think it's important that you've got opportunity to connect with them. There are a lot of consultants who will not get on a discovery call, will not text message you, will not get to know your business and just wants a contract. To me, it's one of the biggest red flags. I'm not saying that you test drive them from a point of give me a free hour of your time. No, what I'm saying is they should be able to hop on a discovery call to make sure that you're the right fit for each other. So again, currently, and I have no plan on changing it as I do on my own discovery calls, we have a pretty tight pre-qualifying in order for people to actually get on a call with me. But I could compromise my entire mastermind or my entire accelerator program by just getting letting every
Yes.
Tom, Dick, and Harry into that program that's not going to be in alignment or has the same values. I don't want all the same people, don't get me wrong. But if you've got a fixed mindset and you're freaking negative and you're going to be down, not looking for opportunity, not taking responsibility for your life, you're going to bring other people down. And I don't want that. So again, be mindful about who you need and start somewhere. I started going to free events because that's all I could afford at the beginning. But then I realized that free events, there was minimal return on investment. So then I would pay $10, $20, $100, $1,000 per ticket. And theoretically, the more I paid, the more value and return I got, either through client referrals or through podcast opportunities, blog opportunities, speaking opportunities, etc. And then I remember I then went, the most expenses back in 2016, I went to Chris Ducker's mastermind in the Philippines where 50 entrepreneurs were over there and 9 top entrepreneurs were speaking. And it was the best thing I've ever spent. I had to beg Chris and his wife, Ezra, to give me a payment plan so that I could go there. But gosh, they changed
Chris's
the trajectory.
I used to listen to his podcast.
Youpreneur, maybe. Great guy. But it was absolutely sensational what happened in those, 7 days in the Philippines that really changed everything for where I is at. So start small. But again, there's an essence of the power of paying to play, is that, I pay to get into my coach's ecosystem, that I'm no longer just a number. And if you take, for example, my group that has almost 10,000 people, I can't know all those 10,000 businesses. But when you pay to work with me, I get to know you. I'm looking for opportunity. Who can I connect you with? You're no longer a number anymore because I can't hold that much space for everyone. So always surround yourself by the people that will lift you up and help you move quicker and faster in a way that's in alignment.
You have a board of directors or advisors?
No, we don't.
All right, Angela, under our final 5 questions, what do you think is the hardest thing growing a small business?
Hardest thing, I would say, is people management.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it's where the value's at, from many businesses. You can't do it on your own.
Yep.
Favorite business book would just help you the most?
Yeah, The Go-Giver, the one that I mentioned earlier.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Listen, I might have my own podcast and that, but I don't really use, I don't listen to podcasts. What resources would I use? Listen, she's a good friend of mine, but I've paid for her program, so full disclosure. But Denise Duffield-Thomas, she's a money mindset coach, really looking at where are you self-sabotaging and or your money beliefs are really stuffing you up from not only just personal growth, it could be around investing or retirement or things like that, but also business growth. And so that's really helped.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
The one tool that I would say that stitches everything together for my business, and if I didn't have it, it would be very hard, would be Zapier, understanding where you would zap things in an automation way. My good friend James Rose uses Zapier for 70 hours worth of man work every single month. So he doesn't have to pay 70 hours to a VA. He's been able to set up all the zaps and automation that has now not only saved him time, but saved him money. So Zapier and utilizing it for your business and how it works best is probably the one.
It's a great tool. And for the audience, it allows you to connect different systems together much easily. So like, for example, if someone signs up for my program, they would sign up with ThriveCart, but then ThriveCart, we would then send a zap to our Active Campaign, and then Active Campaign would then fire off the welcome email. So there's no manual labor, but at the same time, it's connecting with ThriveCart. When that ThriveCart goes in, it's also sending another zap to ClickUp. And inside of ClickUp, it's sending a task to my team to then onboard the people. So you can have multiple zaps, as they're called, going to different things, which just buys back your time, and it's a better customer journey for clients. Great. Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
What I've always said, which is failure is not an option.
Love it. Thanks very much for your time today, Angela. I think the audience got a shit ton of value out of what you've shared with us. Great journey, really interesting. And you've clearly passionate about what you do and focusing on helping women in business, particularly. I think it's a wonderful purpose.
Thanks so much for having me. And again, if the audience wants to connect, they're more than happy to go to the website, which is angelahenderson.com.au, and then choose whatever works best for them to connect further. So no, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, we'll link through to obviously your website, but also your podcast as well in the show notes. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.